I think, therefore I am. But I'm thinking all the time, and I don't know who I am. Am I? Are you? I'm in the middle of nowhere, and it's a good place to be. Welcome to Just Nowhere with Dr. Samuel Zinner. Welcome everybody to Just Nowhere. This is Dr. Samuel Zinner from the mountain village of Aulla in Tuscany, Italy. Tonight we're going to be talking about the linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. His dates are 1857, died in 1913. Now his theory of the radical arbitrariness of the sign dominated linguistics for the 20th century, and it still dominates linguistics today. Right, and that is that there's no natural connection between a tree, for instance, and the word tree. Now, in his later years, Saussure realized that this idea, right, of the radical arbitrariness of the sign or of words cannot be correct. Because he realized that if it were, there'd be no way to get from the semiotic to the semantic, or from signs to sentence, however way you want to phrase it, right? So now a part of a new theory that I would propose is how to bridge that gap, how you get from the sign to the sentence, right? Is phonosemantics, right? That is that there is a relation between the semantic, between the meaning and the sound of the word, right? And there's abundant evidence for this, right, in a series of scientific studies published from 2020 to this year. So it'll probably take some time for the textbooks to catch up. But anyway, with phonosemantics, we now come to another, or really the other main theory of Saussure, and that is his anagram theory. Right, and ironically, this has not had much of an impact, or not equally so, right, on linguistics, because Saussure never published this theory. And what was it? A quick example. He noticed, for example, that in Homer's Iliad, in a passage that would mention the name of the hero Agamemnon, that in that general passage, right, the sounds and the letters of the name Agamemnon proliferate in various sequences, or transpositions, for instance, right? And these types of anagrams, they come in many different arrangements and in different techniques. They don't have to be written, they can be orally based, and that's what we're really going to be talking about tonight. Because I want to welcome our very special guest, Martin Schwartz. He is the Emeritus Professor of Iranian Studies at the University of California at Berkeley. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting me, Samuel. This is a pleasure to join you and engage with you this time in public. Shall I start, Samuel?
Yes, please do. Please.
As far as Saussure is concerned, as Samuel said, he didn't get to publish these speculations of his, perhaps because he wasn't sufficiently confident. I think that was the case. But they were published by a scholar named Starobinsky. Starobinsky has a selection of Saussure's relevant ideas in a little book called in French Les mots sous les mots, or in English, Words Upon Words. Now, when I first saw Starobinsky's Words Upon Words in a bookstore, I looked at it and I said, what kind of crap is this? And I may even have hidden the book away so no one would be troubled by it, so to speak. But gradually, in my own studies of Zarathustra, I'll tell you about that in a minute, I from my own viewpoint, with my own methodology, I came to see that the gist of his idea was certainly correct. Now, I don't follow his terminology. I don't follow his schemes. In my opinion, the difference that you, Samuel, touched upon between the written and the oral is quite crucial. But I did come to see the value of Saussure's ideas. I was informed by them. It's not as though I didn't know about them, but I came to see them for myself, not thinking Saussure, but thinking Zarathustra, thinking the Gathas, the poems by Zarathustra. I should also say that a very prestigious late scholar, Calvert Watkins, an absolutely brilliant Indo-Europeanist, took up, as it were, within his own, again, within his Watkins's own scope of his data, Vedic and other stuff, took up the anagram theory. I could mention in passing that Watkins plagiarized me as for my Gothic examples. That's a story in itself, and it's not worth telling here.
Welcome to the club.
But I did mention it in a footnote, and we spoke about it, you know. That's another story. But Watkins is an important figure, and to see what he did with this kind of idea, I recommend his big book, How to Kill a Dragon. If you like ancient languages, it's a good read. Okay. So as I said, really, the corpus that I'll be talking about are the 17 religious poems by the real Zarathustra, nothing to do with Nietzsche. He flourished in Iranian and Central Asia somewhere between 1400 and 1000 BCE. His poems were composed orally before the Iranians wrote, and only much later were they written down in Persia in a phonetic alphabet designed for the purpose. There are 12 poems, and they're arranged in 5 groups according to their meter. And each group is called, it's a little confusing, a Gatha. So there are 12 poems, but there are really 5 Gathas. And they occur as part of an independent liturgical arrangement called the yasnas. So each has a yasna number, and the yasna numbers have nothing to do with their order of composition. So the first is yasna 28, the last is yasna 51. I can prove that 46 comes before 32, and on and on and on. I can prove the sequence. So numbers, when I say yasna 28 or whatever, that's just a technicality to tell you where in the corpus the poems are located. And as it happens, the Gathas form the earliest part, the earliest stratum of what is called the Avesta. The Avesta kept on being composed orally over many centuries. And somewhat like the Bible, one could say, a lot of the ideas are heterogeneous, so that what Zarathustra had in mind is not at all necessarily what the authors later on in the Avesta had in mind, even though They are informed by the Gathas, and even though the later corpus has Zarathustra as an absolutely holy figure, never mind that they often, in fact, contradicted the spirit of the Gathas. That's another story. But he was, I would say, an innovator theologically. The subtleties of his theology in the long run didn't quite stick, so that all sorts of older stuff of a frankly polytheistic nature crept in to what became a syncretistic religion called Zoroastrianism. Now, what I've discovered about the Gathas is that you can say there are two basic dimensions, the overt dimension and a covert dimension. They are not at contradiction at all to one another. It's as though the esoteric dimension expands on and makes far more interesting the exoteric, the obvious. I say obvious, it doesn't mean that everything is obvious. Language is difficult. Everyone admits that the syntax is really complicated, probably intentionally so. But the idea here is that Zarathustra was operating within a patronage system. And through his poetry, which was within a tradition where interesting stuff was expected by the audience, he wanted certain patrons to have a wow experience when they understood what he was doing. So within the esoteric dimension, which consists of all kinds of strategies, it is composed to be complicated, but ultimately to be understood. Some of it, as we'll see, is very subtle. So when the patrons got the whole picture, they said, this is a guy who will give us immortality by mentioning our names in his poetry. People will hear of us in future, and so we'll have a future kind of life. So I can sit here and tell you that Zarathustra's chief patron was Wishtaspa, another patron was Faushaustra, Gemaspa, and so forth and so on. How do I know this? Because it's there. His patrons are named, and this is one of many reasons why I think the stuff is what it claims to be. Poems by Zarathustra, in which, for that matter, he often complains about, in an early poem, he complains about not having patronage. He mentions his patrons. I think all of this would have been unintelligible if it wasn't real. No one could invent such a thing. It doesn't make sense. Especially this constant concern about patronage. It's not going to be invented just the way it was. Okay. So, now, I was able to expand from Zarathustra, from the Gathas and his techniques, to some of the same techniques, especially the Saussurean anagram, or whatever you want to call it. Saussure has various terms of various kinds of anagrams. I'm not going to use those terms, but how I was able to see that he was right from other ancient Indo-European literatures was quite specific. There is a famous classicist, Gregory Nudge, or as he pronounces it, Naj, even though he speaks Hungarian perfectly well. Nudge wrote about what he called the ainos, which is a specific kind of speech that he finds in archaic poetry, particularly Pindar. The word ainos, by the way, is related to Greek enigma. Enigma means making an ainos. That's our English word enigma. So
Yes.
there's something in some way kind of enigmatic, not necessarily a riddle, but it has the air of something to be understood in the genre called the ainos. And this is what Nudge said about the ainos. He spoke of the ainos in terms of a code which presupposes a restricted audience who, one, understand the message of the code that is the poetry. Two, have been raised on the proper ethical standards that are the message that the code of the poetry teaches. Three, are socially connected to the poet so that the message of the code can be transmitted to them and through them. Now, I looked at this stuff at lunch and I said, well, I know a code, an anagrammatic code, among other things, in the Gathas. Yes, he speaks to a special audience who are grouped together by all of them following Zarathustra and sharing the value of righteousness, which Zarathustra preaches. This is practically a technical word, righteous ones, as opposed to the wrongful ones, wrongsome ones in this dualistic worldview. And I said, let me see what passages Nudge cites to back this up. Well, there were two passages of Pindar. And I'll review one of them just to save time. The other one is simple. And if we have time, if you like, I can go through it.
Sure.
But I'll stick to this one example. There's a bit of a joke here. The joke is that when I saw the word code, even though Nudge made it clear that he's just talking Prague school stuff. I don't know, I've been to the famous square in Prague. I don't know from Prague school. But there is a school of linguistic thought and literary analysis that was associated with Prague. It's called the Prague School. And when the Prague school speaks of a code, they're speaking very loosely. They don't mean anything encrypted. They don't mean a code in the sense of what? Like a spy code, like some gizmo to be deciphered somehow.
Right.
After I presented my material for a group of nudges at Harvard, actually a couple of years after, I was sitting with Nudge and his wife in a Lebanese restaurant in Boston, and we were talking about this stuff again. And he said, well, you know, Marty, when I spoke of code, I didn't mean really anything cryptological, but you found it anyway.
Yes.
So, I mean, I wasn't sure that he meant anything cryptological, but I looked at the two passages, and those two passages, which are characterized by a kind of formula of speech to the knower. The basic idea is, I am speaking to someone who knows. I'm speaking to someone who understands. This is a signal to the audience that something interesting is about to come. Ultimately, within the Hellenic tradition, I think that in Pindar it goes back to Orphism. I'm not going to go into the cryptology such as it may be in Orphism, but that kind of phrase, I speak to those who understand, is in the Orphic material, I think is ultimately Indo-European, because I found that kind of phrase, indeed with riddle-like associations in the Rig Veda, and most importantly, I found it in the Gathas. He has a phrase, I speak to the knower, meaning, hey, knower, listen up. The knower is also his divinity, Ahura Mazda. He is also, and his audience is the knower. So there's a kind of threefold aspect of knowing. So in Pindar's Olympian Ode 2, the second Olympian Ode, verse 85, Pindar says he has in his quiver arrows which phona enta sunatoisen, which have a voice, which make voice, phona enta sunatoisen, for those who understand. So here's a variant of our formula. And he compares himself to his rivals, who are mere chatterers, like a couple of ravens who just chatter randomly without any effect. Nothing is achieved through this chatter. And he says that these two rivals, they may have been Bacchylides and Simonides, but never mind that. When he says that they're like crows speaking, or ravens speaking with all kinds of tongue, and chatter useless things. That phrase is panglossiai korakeshos akranta garuaton. Then a little later he says, with my missiles, my arrows of good praise, Hanusais, yes, Panglossiaos, sibilants, Hanusais, stretching my bow, Akraganti, to the city of Akragas, called in Sicily today Agrigento, which was the place that his patron Theron ruled. The poem, in theory, is a report on a racing victory by Theron. You get in these words, akraganti tanusais, the same sounds, but more focused, more concentrated, as it were more targeted than in the Panglossiac or Kessos Akranta Garu aton, where you see Akranta
Yes.
Ganti and so forth and so on. So when he shoots these arrows of praise, they reach their target.
Yes.
So that is what I discovered. Just looking where nudge, not knowing what I would find, where he directed me.
Yes.
Now, to give you an idea of the sort of stuff we'll be listening for, and even though it's out of laziness that I prepared no handouts, since we're talking about an oral genre,
Yes.
I'll put the burden on the listener to listen. I don't have to look at any charts, although Lord knows I have plenty of charts. So first let's start with a little Pindar from somewhere else, from a fragment of his.
All right.
These are now wise words, which a certain hero named Amphiaraus is instructing his son, Amphilochus, and he says as follows: "O son, associate with all the various cities by making your mind, your nous, resemble most of all the coloring of the animal who lives in the sea, clinging to rocks. Have your mind on different things at different times, being ready and willing for the occasion to make ainos, epineo." Okay, so there's some critter in the sea who can change colors, and he clings to this and to that, and so forth and so on. Well, who is that critter? It's the octopus, of course. And the octopus, the Greek word that concerns us is polupus or polupos, meaning many-footed. Now, I want you to hear in this description of the creature the sounds of the word polupus. The creature is not named, but he's swimming around, going from place to place, concealing himself in the sea phonically, so to speak. Okay. O teknion pontios theros petraion proti malista non prosperon passais poliesin omile. And it goes on from this. There we have a poliesin pass point for pe. So it amounts to the creature whose name is concealed here. The octopus name is concealed. Now, it's good to have at least 3 points of evidence. Why? That's what they say. You know,
Yes.
Yes. One, maybe, another one, well, maybe, but the third confirms. That's why in the Bible, the sanctity of God is proclaimed, 3 times. The angels say, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. 3 times. Make it certain. So my 3 basic pieces of evidence here are the Gathas, which I haven't talked about yet, Pindar, and for orality, for the fact that this is an oral production, not a literary production, that is originally at hand. By the way,
Yes.
Nudge regards Pindar, even though Pindar is writing, but containing a lot of orality on the brink of
Yes.
The third point of comparison are riddles that in the last century, a scholarly school teacher named Sadovnikov, I think he may have composed the song Stenka Razin, but he taught school children in Siberia and learned, before he taught them to write, he gathered riddles from them. And in the 60s, a Russian scholar named Gerbstman saw that there is a subgenre of these riddles in which not only is that which is to be figured out described in terms of the riddle, but its sounds, the answer's sounds are embedded within the riddle. So one example, which you may know from reading Jakobson, is Черный конь двигает в огонь. The black horse jumps into the fire. Who is the black horse who jumps into the fire? It's Kacherga. Syllable by syllable, Kacherga. You say Kacherga in speaking. That's the poker.
Yes.
It's black because it's carbonized and it jumps into the fire when you poke the fire. So if you hear that, Chorny, which is an imitate Cherny, Chorny, Kon, Gait, Vagon, gives you Kacherga. The answer.
Yes.
And actually, there are a whole bunch of poems on the theme, riddles on the theme of Kacherga, the poker. Now, if I were to do that in English, I could come up with a poem as follows, where the answer is poker, the English word poker. The pony leaps on ochre land. He kicks up smoke, but never sand. So
Yes. Excellent.
Thanks. I even did it in French once.
Excellent. Excellent example of Saussurean anagram. Yes.
So that will illustrate the genre in English of these school children were English and they had that poetic spirit that the Russian kids had. They might come up with this. Here's another one. The black horse races into the fight. Черный конь скачет в огонь. So it's there you get scotch for the silver kacherga. The black loon fled on the field and gathered gold. Черная гагара по полю скакала, золото сбирала. Sorry, золото сбирала.
Yes.
And another one. Full is the little fold, with little red sheep. In does the gray wolf leap. and makes them all bold. Sasiechik, krasnych, wieczik, volk, suvi, skochit, sviach, razganit. So, again, you get kacherga in yet another riddle.
Yes.
And they continue. Sometimes there's even some that have two words. Alongside poker, there's also the coals, the ugly of the ugly. Galitza lay upon a red alley. Golden eggs, the Galitza tally. So that's the kind of stuff you're talking about.
Yes.
But in the Gothic examples, what I find interesting is the context which clues the listeners in that something's happening. So, for example, the Gothic Yasna 30 begins, Lo, I shall tell, O you who seek, the things to be understood by the knower. 4 lines later, we read first line of the next stanza. Hear with your ears, see the best things with bright mind. Now, this word best things is a theological buzzword. It represents paradise, where there will be the best things. As a matter of fact, Persian still has a word, behisht, which means paradise. Etymologically, it means the best things, but it just means paradise. So that's from this wahishta. And the best things are also the things that Zarathustra tells you about how you'll achieve paradise. So the message is also the best things.
Yes.
So narration tells you the best things, which promise the best things that one will get if one listens. This
Yes.
wahishta is a very, very important word throughout the Gathas. It's a neuter plural. Wahishta. Okay. Best things. And he, in right here, says that, speaks of the things to be glimpsed amidst the lights in bliss. In this very passage I just read, that very, very line. Remember that word bliss for future. It's vraza, W-R-1-Z is the root, raz. And so Zarathustra says, yeah, let's imagine, see with a bright mind the things that are visible amidst the lights and bliss. So it's some kind of meditative process whereby you see the luminous wahishta paradise.
Yes.
Now, he gives you that word wahishta at the very first line, when he says, now I speak for ye who seek. That is ta waksha ishanta. We have the ta of wahishta, the waksh ish. All
Yes.
right. And so, in the continuation of the poem, so at the very end, these syllables are scrambled as part of the poem. So when he says, hear wahishta, hear the best things, he means hear wahishta. He means that, well, literally,
Yes.
or if you will,
Yes.
possibly. Now here's another poem. In other ways, closely related to what I read you. As a matter of fact, it's the next poem in the sequence. Remembering those avowals, which are promises, declarations, and so forth, those avowals of yours, with a capital Y, which are unheard by those who, through avowals of wrongness, destroy the life realms of rightness, but are the best things, Wahishta, for those who will be faithful to Mazda. And this opening contains the word the Wahishta again, as what I call a mixophonism. It's mixed in there. Ta wa ra ta maranta agushta agushta wa sanghamahi. We. That gives us the ending. Ahi, ahi. So agushta. Yes. Matter of fact, Nudge says in his meta commentary that for those outside the target group, the words are unheard. He says that. Yes. Little did he know.
Yes.
Okay. So now, again, here the idea is speaking for the initiated.
Yes.
Now, this kind of phrase, I speak to the initiate in the Gatha, to the knower in the Gathas, applies not only to the anagrammatic stuff, but to other interesting techniques. For example, there are two very important theologumena. By theologumena, I mean teachings about God. In fact, part of the doctrine that the divinity, Mazdahura, is one, but at the same time comprises a plurality of other divine entities who are separate from and yet part of his nature. And so there's a God is one and not one. There's no declaration of the oneness of God emically. So I don't think one should speak of the Gathas as monotheistic or polytheistic. There's something else. That is the mystique that I just told you. God is one and several. But none of those several have anything to do with the older polytheistic divinities. They're abstract entities.
Yes.
Mazda Ahura, the Lord Wisdom, or the wise Lord. Wahumana, or Mana Wahu, good mind, and Asha Wahishta. I'll call it Ata Wahishta, Artha Wahishta, the older pronunciation. The best rightness. Different from Wahishta, this is now in unit. The three of them especially form a unity with Mazdahura. And they are, each of them, stressed overtly and through their initial sounds in the corpus. Through their initial sounds, as for Wahumana, several passages where he introduces it with that formula of speech to the knowing. So, wa, ma, or ma, wa. I'm looking at my essay in the Wiley-Blackwell Companion to Zoroastrianism.
Yes.
Okay, translation. For I shall tell thee, Lord Wisdom, since a man should speak to a knowing one, that which comes as an evil to the wrongsome one, but is as is wished for him who upholds rightness. So the key sounds here are wa, ma. This stanza comes right after a stanza in which the final words are for the announcement through good mind. So he says, I'm going to announce good mind, but he doesn't tell you how he's doing it. Here it is. Ata wachsha mazda. Widushai zina mruya. Yata kaya drugwata ushta ya artan adradwai. Auzi mantra shyata. Ya widushai mravati.
Yes.
Here's another one. Who? Sorry, which one? Is it the righteous one or the wrongsome one? Should one choose more to believe? Let the knowing one speak to the knowing one. Let not the unknowing one prattle. Be for us, Mastahur, or wise Lord, or Lord Wisdom, the revealer of good mind. So there the denouement is good mind, but listen to the sounds. Urnuata mazia. Well, no. Widwa, Vidusha, Brau, Ma, Awidra. Bayata, Dina, Mastahura, sorry, Bayata, Zdi, Mastahura, Wahau Sadaf Shamana. So
Yes.
you get all that stuff encoded. Even more remarkable is the following example. In Yasna 45, he begins, now I shall speak out. Listen now and hear. You who seek from near and from far. Reminds us of the opening of one of the other poems. Not accidental, I think so, it's systematically related. For it is clear, understanding. Okay. Then 2 stanzas later. And I shall speak forth about this existence's first thing, which the wise Lord, the knower, told me. Those who will not put this mantra into effect, just as I think it and will speak it, for them will the word woe be their existence's first thing, the last thing. So you get the first thing, you get the last thing, which is eschatological, forming a sandwich, 3 lines, each of which begins with a relative phenomenal form, and in the center of this 5-line sandwich, you get no less than 4 phrases with m and w. Yam moi, widwa, Mazda, waucha. That in wah noise, it's a mantra. So you get the wah and the man. Warshanta, wa. Ata iman manaicha, wachaucha, idea aham shawat, ahat apam. Nice alliteration at the end.
Yes.
So 4 phrases, mo plus the man and the wa. Is very good. And so here we have what I call not mixophonism, but acrophonism. It's the first sound, it's the initial.
Yes.
We think of initials in terms of writing, but initials are very salient to the pre-literate mind. There's something about initials. I could talk about it, you could talk about it, Sam, right?
Sure. It brings to mind
Go ahead.
the previously mentioned Roman Jakobson, right, one of the most prominent 20th century linguists. Now, his theory, which matches that of Stravinsky, whom you also mentioned, was that a lot of these anagrams or encryptions, encodings, whatever you want to call them, right, could be produced unconsciously, right? And my own feeling, which I've shared with you before, is that I think we have to be careful and recognize that there may be some degree of unconscious automatic production of some of these anagrams. On the other hand, we don't want to denigrate the genius and skill, right, of poets and religious thinkers throughout the ages. And I think, and I'm wondering here what you might think about my thought here, and that is, I think that Jakobson and Stravinsky were not appreciative enough of the dynamics of oral cultures and the astounding abilities, right, that poets and storytellers have in these oral cultures. And so not being familiar with that degree of genius and artistry, they have to invoke the theory of, well, a lot of this is probably just unconscious, right? So do you think that their, I hate to say it, but their ignorance, right, or their inexperience, right, with oral culture contributed to this idea?
I'll give you three non-answers.
All right.
Then I'll try to answer.
All right.
I remember a good colleague of mine, the late Mackenzie, D.N. David Neil Mackenzie, was visiting with me once, and I showed him some of my charts and so forth and so on with some of these devices. And he said to me, "Schwartz, you are a New York Jewish sophisticate. You have no right," and he liked Jews, by the way, and spoke a good deal of Yiddish, Mackenzie did. Character and a half, Neil was. May rest in peace. And continued to say, "You have no right to foist this intellectuality onto primitive man, Zarathustra." I found it interesting as an attitude, because we from literate culture somehow, not, if we don't know, if we don't study what some of these oral cultures produce. And let me say, this is an outstanding example of oral literature that we have in the Gathas. It's not typical. Yes. This guy was a genius. He operated on the brink of cognitive abilities in some instances. I'm convinced of that. When I close, I'll give you an example as a case in point. Mm-hmm. So that's one answer. Are there two more? Or rather, two more non-answers? Another answer that I have is a posteriori. I know this corpus exceedingly well. Yes. I can speak about the way it was very, very, very consciously put together, poem by poem, independent of the stuff I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. How he went from the word list of one poems, recycled them into the skeleton of the next poem, did the same thing backwards, generated the next. All of this is a matter of calculation. And I think in the course of what I'll be saying, there are examples which I don't think you come up with unconsciously. There's a real question as to when the unconscious becomes conscious.
Yes.
Who knows? But the final decision is conscious. I mean, you have all these things in your head. I mean, I sometimes stay awake thinking of limericks and all kinds of crazy word games. And the elements are unconscious. They're in my entire mental field of data.
Yes.
And how they come together? Well, they finally do come together in such a way that I say, all right, here it is. I sometimes think of Mr. and Mrs. Zarathustra. They're in bed. And Zarathustra, he's thinking, I got it. This'll kill, this'll knock him dead. And he wakes up his wife and says, I just figured out a fantastic stratagem that I'm going to use. Fantastic device, as it sounds. I'm going to take the word for bliss and will you let me sleep? You're waking me up. I can never get any sleep with your gathas. So, little domestic visits. I don't want to demean Roman Jakobson, who was a guy who was very aware of literature. That was, his
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
But, and as for Jean Starobinsky, I don't know his work well enough, but I agree with you that they didn't appreciate what is possible in orality. And I think that, you get unconscious, random results.
Yes.
Where the poet doesn't even mean it necessarily. Plenty of coincidences.
Yes.
But I think that people who are trained as poets, who are trained in these genres, even those little Russian school children in Siberia, were trained to generate these things. They were, of course, games, but
Yes.
there was a virtue of figuring stuff out, of creating these things. So they're like little poets. I think the stuff that forms it is unconscious. But what is manifested is conscious. If I can use a kind of metaphor, Pindar speaks of the arrows in his quiver. Now,
Yes.
a scholar named Glenn Most, M-O-S-T, I don't know if he's Most the most, but he looked at this Pindaric poem, Second Olympian Ode, 85 and following, and noted that Pindar spoke of hermeneus is necessary to bring forth the sounds. Hermeneus, Most shows brilliantly, is not an interpreter in this archaic period, but it's someone who can take that which is latent, words which are not yet revealed, which are merely unmanifest, and make them patent.
Yes.
So that with Pandora's jar, it's just latent until the jar is opened and the stuff in her jar becomes realized. So in our minds, stuff is latent in that dark, unrevealed area of the mind, the unconscious, but it's there, and it has to be brought forth.
Yes.
Into the light of poetic realization. So yeah, it's unconscious, but it becomes conscious, and the
Yes.
process is conscious. And what is poetry all about?
Mm-hmm.
And are we to say that pre-literate poets were stupider than literate poets? No
Mm-hmm.
way do I think one should say
Yes.
that.
Yes. Well, neither do I wish to denigrate Jakobson's scholarship. He's produced immensely important contributions. Only want to emphasize that I think that he probably exaggerated the role of the unconscious, so that we probably, as you say, as I would phrase it, we need a theory that combines both
Yeah,
the unconscious and the conscious contributions, right? And so that's would be fairer and more accurate, in my
yeah,
opinion.
I agree with you. Um,
Yes, and we shouldn't overlook that, right? We consciously train our unconscious, just as a pianist, a musician would, right? They're constantly practicing, and then eventually this gets built into their unconscious, and they then can automatically play, right? An extraordinarily complicated piece of music, as and it just comes out of the unconscious and through the fingers, right? In the
there
piano
are puns.
case.
I've been known occasionally to pun myself. And some of these punsters, it's like they find a situation and they suddenly pull out a pun to that situation. And it can be a remarkable pun. They do wacko. Boom.
Yes,
There it is.
yes,
How do they do it that quickly?
yes,
They have that kind of mind. Where
yes.
is it before they do it? It's in the quiver, in the dark quiver, waiting to be manifest.
Yes, 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 yes.
I mentioned among these three important theologumena, yes, Arta Wahishta,
Yes.
which is very, very, very frequently mentioned alongside Wahumana. And these three, as a matter of fact, Mazda Hura, Arta Wahishta, Wahumana, occur in every stanza of one of the earliest poems, Yasna 28. It's not going to
Yes.
be accidental that he mentions all three of them. So there's a canon of three. Not to say that there aren't other divine entities which figure in Mazda Hura's nature, but these three are particularly important. We don't find the word three mentioned, and there's no trinity, but it happens that there's a very important triad here. I mean, if we can conceive of a primum inter pares, a most important among equals, then we can think of a prime three, so to speak. I mean, a foremost three among a
Yes.
plurality. Yeah, so you get one plus three plus more.
Yes.
So, in fact, you have the mixophonism, the acrophonism, mystique of the initials,
Yes.
in the for the entity best brightness, Arta Wahishta. As a matter of fact, the words Arta Wahishta are in the first phrase of the following stanza, which is Yasna 33:3, in the words Artaunai Wahishta, for the righteous person, he who is best.
Yes.
Who's best for the righteous person. In other words, that guy who acts best, who's the best guy for the righteous one, that's the subject. So you get arta wahishta within that.
Yes.
But listen to the other alliterations here. Ya artaunai wahishta, huaish watuai atwa wulzanya. Aryamna wa ahya, widans wa swashahai kawai, athau artahya ahad, wahausha wasna. So you get awa.
Yes.
This was observed, just this alliteration was observed by my excellent late colleague Hans Peter Schmidt, but he didn't say anything more about it. So the alliteration pattern here. But he didn't say that anything was encoded. Okay. Now, I looked at the context here. Oh, I haven't translated it. Fine. Whoever is best to the righteous one, through family or as community member, or through tribe, Lord, or allotting diligently for the cow, he will be on the pasture of rightness and good life. It's obviously
yes, obvious.
Yeah. And you have here three societal hierarchies: family, community, and tribe. There are two other poems which have these family, community, tribe. And they have some other resemblance to this stanza. And those two other poems also have allusion to bliss, that paradisiac bliss that I mentioned at the beginning.
Yes.
The root braz, noun brasna, meaning bliss. So I'm thinking about this. I'm saying, is bliss here? In short, I recognized a kind of formulaic structure, and I was hoping that the whole package would be here. I'm looking down, and I see the next line, which tells you what is in store for the best person. They will achieve the wish of and be in the favor, literally the inclination, good inclination of the wise by Lord Wisdom. They will achieve the wish and be in Ahura Mazda, who is favor or grace. You say, well, those are the conditions, really, in which one gets the bliss. So at least the meaning, the idea of the bliss and its context is here. I'm looking at this in a cafe some years ago. And as I'm thinking about this, well, can't fight City Hall. At least the meaning is there, not the word. A friend comes into the cafe and says, I'm thinking of going to this James Bond movie, new movie. You want to come along? I'm thinking, come back in 5 minutes. Okay. I look down at it. And then I see the initial of this phrase I just read to you. Warai Radanti Hurahya Zaushai Mazda. And it's acrostic. It's a phonic acrostic.
Mm-hmm.
The word rasma, the word for bliss, which I expected to be there for formulaic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there it is.
Yes.
Yeah. But one can say, well, how are they going to hear these initials? How's the audience going to hear? I say, well, maybe they're super keen and they already are hip to the idea of initials.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an awful lot to process. So I said, well, if we think that Zarathustra could have repeated some of these lines, bringing out the nuance of the repetition. Well,
Yes.
you hear, let's say, Kulthum perform an Arabic poem, a qasida or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she's a famous singer. She will take one phrase and repeat it with a different kind of nuance of the voice, a little more, until she finally says it in such an emphatic way that the audience flips. You hear, they really go crazy because they've just, gotten
Mm-hmm.
the third repetition. It's like she's made it in some way clear to them. It's a very interesting phenomenon. There is some reason to think that Zarathustra recited his gathas, sometimes making each recitation of the line louder. There's a traditional indication of that somewhere in the later Avesta. Enunciating the gathas, each line louder than the first, something like that.
Yes.
So I figured out I have to be able to reproduce this effect. I was going to present this at a conference in Bombay. And what I did at home, this was still the days of cassette recorders, I spent a day rehearsing, practicing how he would go from the one line as we have it here to the one word of rasma. So I painstakingly did this until I had it right. I had the cassette, and I took the cassette with me to the conference, and I was about to show how this could be done. And after the hierarchy of presentations in Indian society over there, one person is delegated to give it to another person, who gives it to the third person, who puts it into the cassette player. And when I say play, plays it. Okay, presses the button, nothing. The electricity went out. Well, I'll have to wing it. I'll have to do it right here. The heck with it, he said. So I started with something like, and here the problem is my eyes. So look at it, read it. Let's say we start with the opening. Warai Rat Nioraya Zare Mazda. Rasma. I could do that better, but one, by emphasizing certain syllables and by a certain vibrato, one can do it.
Yes.
The audience dug it, as they used to say. In those days, the word dig was probably still fashionable. They dug it. But afterwards, I was speaking to a colleague the late Helmut Humbach, one of the important scholars of the Gathas. And Humbach seemed somewhat unhappy, a little grumpy. He said, well, the audience liked your performance. After all, you people know your cantorial tradition, how to chant these things. And I thought it would be a little rude to say, yeah, Professor Humbach, we Jews know how to do Aryan. But let that be. Now, what is interesting, another thing which is interesting, and I'll move now toward my conclusion. I'm going to skip the other two, one of the other poems that has the root of Raz and family, community, and clan. Actually, Raz is mentioned there in terms of a unity or connection between, for the righteous person, the blissful connection of rightness for one of the patrons. This blissful connection is referring to the souls being integrated in the afterlife into the Godhead, will become part of the co-united aspects of the divinity, Mazda Hura, Wahumana Arsha Wahishta.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's that blissful connection. The word for connection there is Sar. I'm going to read you a stanza about which I could talk for a whole hour.
All right.
There are riddles within riddles in the stanza, but if you get my old article called Encryptions in the Gathas, there's a PDF, a little funkily uploaded, but there's a PDF of that online, Encryptions. This is called Encryptions in the Gathas. My name, of course, PDF. Read that, and better yet, read the account of that stanza.
I'll include a link in the description to that PDF.
Good.
All right, so mysteries within mysteries.
Yeah, and I'm just going to give you that which pertains to the phonic stuff.
Yes.
Not the semantic stuff.
Sure.
Yasna 32:1.
All right.
Now, as it happens, this poem, Yasna 32:1, is closely related to Yasna 28, in which, as I mentioned, that triad, Mazda Hura, Wahumana, and Arta Wahishta, occur in every stanza.
Yes.
Arta Wahishta is most explicit in this poem. We more frequently find just Arta serves for Arta Wahishta in the context when it's mentioned with Mazda Hura and Wahumana.
Yes.
Now, Yasna 32:1. And of him did family entreat. Of him community with clan entreated. As also the demons at my prompting, they entreated for his Ahura Mazda's bliss. And they said as follows: may we be thy messengers to hold back those inimical to you. Okay, I'll tell you what. Tell you about the whole riddle. It'll just take a minute. You wonder why demons are here mentioned as not only entreating for the divine bliss, but for saying they'll be Ahura Mazda's messengers to hold back his enemies. Well, there's a word play here. The word hold back can also mean uphold, hold up, and the word for messengers can also mean smoke. So when the righteous people say, we'll be your messengers to hold back your enemies, the demonic group is saying, we'll be smoke and we'll uphold your enemies. And the idea of smokiness, obscurity, lack of vision runs through the poem. So that's the solution to the riddle semantically. But let's look at this now phonically. You get as the last four words of the first two lines, Ahya Vrzanam mat Aryamna, Nai Ahurahya Vrazma Mazda. And there, Ahya Ahurahya rhyme, Vrzanam Vrazma are phonically similar. And the Mna continues with a Mnai. And so you get four words in each line whose initials are A, W, M, A, and M, A, W, M. And if you see them as overlapping, these initials, you get A, W, M, M, A, M, A, W, Ma.
Yes.
And if people could perceive not merely the initials, but you double up on them so that they overlap.
Yes.
Then this overlapping, I maintain, is symbolic of the theological overlapping of the three entities. And indeed, in the next stanza, it says, to them did Mazda Ahura, who is united, Saremna, that root Sar, or connected with Manawahu, with good mind, who is the, rather with Wahumana, who is the best associate of sunny rightness, respond from his dominion. We have chosen your proper holy, your holy proper mindedness. It shall be ours.
Yes.
Later on, actually in two places, he addresses the other party, the bad guys. But he addresses them, Mazda Ahura addresses them from his union with Wahumana, with good mind, and with Arta Wahishta. So there you have overtly, they're all being interconnected.
Yes.
And I maintain that symbolically, that is indicated in this alliteration pattern.
Yes.
Now that's heck of difficult from a viewpoint of cognition. I think that, well, if I could see that, I think it's possible for Zarathustra to have conceived that. I think Zarathustra had the mind that could have conceived that, that he was projecting the idea of the interconnection of these entities at the phonic as well as the overt level. How many of his audience perceived that? We can't say. Certainly, his audience perceived enough of his stuff. what he
Yes.
said in the way of hints afterwards between the poems to his initiates, we don't know. He could have actually hinted enough, or maybe even gave some overt teaching about this poem. We just have the poems. We don't have the commentary. We don't have his commentary. But this was an interactive, intellectual community. I say intellectual because, yeah, some of these guys were warlords. They were tough hombres in their own way. I mean, rulers and so forth. But they were not dummies. And I think they were the smarter guys around who were attracted to this poet. I think they could have perceived what I'm talking about. At least it was meant to be perceived, I believe. It is there to be perceived. So this is what I meant before as the brink of cognitive ability at which Zarathustra could be operating.
Yes.
I should say also that he has very, very conscious, complex, yet easily stated ways of generating the corpus, first, second, third, so forth poem.
Yes.
Which shows how intentional, and there is the third answer, the question of intentionality, of subliminality, of consciousness, unconsciousness.
Yes, yes.
I can show with chart after chart after chart, I generated scores and scores of these charts that show his technique of composition from one poem to the other. He had a skeleton of words in the first poem, and he took this skeleton of words in order, going in one direction and then going backwards, used that to generate the next poem with the same word skeleton, that backwards, then a third poem, and so forth and so on. This isn't going to be random. It's going to be intentional. It can't be accidental. So one can argue from the greater to the lesser that, well,
yes,
we speak from someone who is so conscious with the production of this poetry, so conscious specifically of words. By words, I mean words of the same root, or even words that sound together, sound alike.
Yes.
Someone who is this conscious in the way he generated the poetry
Yes.
is a fully conscious person linguistically, super conscious. So that is something not for the present lecture. I just thought I would mention it as part of the larger picture.
Yes,
I'm not speaking about the very interesting theological and eschatological world of his at large, but, well, this is the, as it were, the Saussurean, if you can call it that, component.
Yes, yes.
So, well, I work with Zarathustra. I don't work with Saussure, but Saussure is relevant for all of this. And in a way, I think we have to thank him for making us think about such things.
Yes.
And, well, I thank you, Samuel, and I thank the audience. I'll be glad if you have any comments, Samuel.
Yes. Well, yes, you've built up quite a case, a convincing one, and I hope and I trust that the coming generation, right, we'll see the textbooks, right, reflecting this integration of the Saussurean anagram, right, to the same extent that the field has been dominated with this other theory, right, the radical arbitrariness of the sign, which I think should fade away and be replaced with his anagram theory. Or his radical arbitrariness theory should just be corrected and you know, I don't want to say something so negative about Saussure, but it's just that the evidence is no longer there to support the radical arbitrariness, but it seems as if the evidence is mounting, right, for the correctness of his anagram theory. And that really needs to be emphasized at the textbook level in the coming generation.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Because you have built the strongest and I think most consistent case. If this theory, if Saussure's anagram theory becomes part of the textbooks in the coming generation, you will have played a significant role in producing that.
Well, I hope so. I also hope people will appreciate Zarathustra as an index of the human mind. These days, studies of old Iranians, specifically Avestan and especially old Avestan, to which the Gathas belong, taint what it used to be.
Yes.
Say 20 years ago, there were quite a number of people working in the Gathas, working with Avestan, a lot of students. Now the tendency is to Middle Persian, Middle Iranian broadly, but mostly Middle Persian. It's easier than the complexities of the inflected, language. I mean, like imagine people moving from Vedic and Sanskrit to, well, Hindi and whatnot, or Middle Indic, which is not so hard. Yeah,
not so hard. Yes.
So
yes. Well,
there aren't many people being trained in Avestan, and the players these days, as far as Gathas studies are concerned, I think I can count them on one hand. A few died recently.
Yes.
Insla, Schmidt, and there are a few of us left. Some deny the reality of Zarathustra. They deny that there was a single author for this corpus. They don't seem to think that matters much. They like to talk of ritual, so it's about ritual only.
Yes.
A couple of people who maintain seriously Zarathustra. So the Times, and the Times, I don't have to tell you, the humanities are challenged.
Yes.
They were challenged for some years by lots of baloney, lots of nonsense.
Yes, certainly.
And theory and rhetoric, pointless rhetoric and theory.
Yes.
And now institutions are no longer teaching these things, and when they do, well, they don't necessarily teach the more ancient stuff.
Yes, well, let's hope for a better future, Martin.
And I don't have to tell you this. I hope that there will be a world in which people will read. I hope the world will exist. Right now, it seems threatened on a few fronts about which we know. So,
well, let us hope for a better future. And with this, we probably better draw to a close.
So, thanks.